All right. Well, thank you for joining the School Turnaround Podcast. My name is Dr. Chance Lewis, and I am so happy to have today Mrs. Alicia Hash, who is principal of Billingsville Elementary and Cotswold Elementary School. You heard that right. She's principals of two schools at the same time, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. But Mrs. Hash, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here with us today. So, as we get started for today, if you could just introduce yourself to the viewing audience and let them know who you are and a little bit of your story of how you got to this particular point as a principal.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for having me on. So excited to be
Yes.
here today to talk about my passion as an educator and educational leadership and the journey that has taken place over the past 13 years. So as Dr. Lewis shared, I'm Alicia Hash. I am a 20-year educator. I'm here in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. And for the past 13 years, I have served in the role of the principalship. My first 7 years as the role of the principal was at Cotswold Abbey World School, and we were a one campus school. And we were given the amazing opportunity as I was ending my seventh year, or ending the seventh year of my principalship, to be able to merge and partner with our sister school, Billingsville Elementary, which was 1.2 miles away. And that effort was to look at desegregation and integration plans to then look at programs that were successful. Cotswold, as shared, was an Ivy World school with a huge wait list, and the building was overutilized. So look at schools that had a robust program that was highly sought out, and look at schools that the building capacity was underutilized, but there were high concentrations of poverty, and schools that had a challenge when it looked at student academic scores. So with that being said, we were able to go on this journey of becoming one school of excellence on two campuses. And then that brings about where we are today is Billingsville Cotswold Ivy World School, as both schools are now Ivy World schools with all the robust amenities and access and resources to students from all communities.
Yeah, that goes with that, and I don't want to take it lightly, and we'll get into it as we talk today. One, with you leading two schools and making them one, and getting the IB World status. That's a whole another accolade in itself. So I commend you for that as well. So that leads us to our conversation today. And the whole focus of this podcast is to talk about school turnaround. It's a real issue in schools, taking a school that may be low performing or just in need of academic boosting and really shaping that school for success long term, looking at systems, looking at processes as well. So let's dive into your story a little bit around your principalship in leading these two schools that came into one. When we think about school turnaround and what you've been able to do, let's talk about, as you thought about leading this into what it is today and where, I know you envision it to go in the future. Let's talk about some examples of some success initiatives that you had to put in place to one, even plan to make this happen. How did you envision this school turnaround? And then how are you kind of looking at that? How did you motivate the students, the teachers, and the community around this whole school turnaround initiative that you implemented as well?
Absolutely. So one, we were given the gift of time. So I will say anytime that you have an initiative at this magnitude that's taking place, once our school board voted to merge the two schools, we had 1 year of implementation, which meant we were able to provide a level of strategy and intentionality around all the work we would do before we combined the two students. So again, let me back up and just share the structure of the two campuses. All of our students, K2, are on the Billingsville campus, kindergarten through second grade, and all of our students who are third through fifth grade are on the Cotswold campus. So the initial questions or thoughts that would already come up when you're looking at merging two schools. One, that if you look at the school grade, one was a B, one was a D at that time. One had been on the low performing list. So that was, a challenge. And within that year, what you have to do is look at what is working on both campuses, what is
Mm-hmm.
working with both sets of staff, what is working with our school communities, what's working with families, what is working with school partnerships, and let's bring that together and focus on success. So let's not have a lens on what's not working, but let's have a lens
Right.
on what is working. So for that year that we had for planning and implementation, I definitely was strategic and intentional to make sure the staff from both campuses had time to spend together and time to spend on each campus. The students had exposure and access to spend time
Yeah, I remember
together to
that.
build relationships. The parents had time to spend
Mm-hmm.
together on both campuses and engaged in community events, as well as our community partners, because both campuses had very robust community partners. Also, we both fed into the same middle and high school. So, also looking at our feeder patterns, getting data from them to kind of see what was working on the longer trajectory of the students that were coming from both campuses. After a year of that, of intense walkthroughs, getting feedback from staff, looking at student demographic data, looking at student achievement data, we were then able to look at, again, what are both campuses doing well? Because we know standardized test scores are a snapshot in time, but we wanted to
Right.
know from a foundational standpoint, from the kindergarten year all the way to the fifth grade year, what were best practices that were taking place. So, in order to be a strong reading comprehension scholar, you have to make sure
Mm-hmm.
you have strong reading foundational skills. And we were able to find those successes in teachers who had a strong phonics based program, teachers who had a lens on both campuses. If you look at specific programs in your strategies, such as Orton Gillingham. Then, once we started shifting into those third and fifth grade years, we looked at the standards. Which teachers and which staff members are really and facilitators are able to sit down, unpack the standards, and make sure we have crosswalks to our EOG indicators that we found at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
year. So, from a
Right.
strategic standpoint, from a curriculum side, looking at the curriculum, looking at best practices, and then, of course, looking at data. I am a firm believer that when you look at data, you have to look at every individual child. You cannot look
Right.
holistically. You have to look at every individual child from a proficiency and growth standpoint, because we know we have students who come in well above grade level, and we still need to make sure they soar beyond where they came in. And for students who have some gaps within their learning, we need to make sure that that growth is there so that we're closing any opportunity gaps that are evident. So again, from a curriculum standpoint, we were really strategic with that. Who are the master teachers in the building who had the capacity to then be able to build structures and supports and PLCs, to be able to
Sure.
model and support their colleagues as well with the facilitators and the leadership team, and then looking at data and being really strategic around how you're building your instructional practices to make sure you're getting the gains that you need in both literacy and math.
Yeah, and that's important in thinking about this big vision that you had, because you had to deal with some things that a traditional principal didn't have to deal with, merging two communities into one school and all of that. So I'm sure as you were planning this rollout, you had kind of your master plan, but then along the way you ran into some barriers and setbacks and challenges. So talk to us a little bit about, as you were developing this, what were some of the major challenges that you faced that were expected and those that were unexpected, along the way?
Absolutely. So, in a normal academic
Hmm.
year, you as a principal, you can come in with the instructional lens, focus on instructional leadership, and just be able
Right.
to dig deep into that work. When you're going through a transition like our school community was in, there's a micro political lens that you always have to have in the work that you're doing. When you were looking at merging two schools, one that was 800 students versus one that was 300, one that had a
Right.
very robust PTA, one that had very robust community partners. There are a lot of voices there. And what I
Right.
will tell anybody now that we are in the 6th year of this model, so this is who we are. What I will tell anybody is the students' transition, their transition was pretty seamless once we got everybody on their grade level configuration campuses. But when you are working with staff and you're working with parents and you're working with partners, you do have to make sure that you're doing, like they say, not just the hard work, but the heart work, because you
Mm-hmm.
are appealing to multiple stakeholders and people are coming into situations as a school merger that you want to make sure that it never appears to be any form of school takeover, or that one
Right.
school's culture is overriding the other. We are very fortunate, very, very fortunate that both of our schools were in historic communities that were 1.2 miles away from each other. Our
Right.
K2 campus sits in the Greer Heights community. It is a historic African American school, historic African American community. And behind our school building is the original Rosenwald School, which was
Yeah.
built for that
That's
community.
right.
So we never want the culture or the history of the story to be misplaced or displaced within this in this work. And then in the Cotswold community, the school has been there over 60 years. Again, another historic community within Charlotte, 1.2 miles away, very different demographics of both communities that were so close to each other. But with all that rich history and heritage and all that people have put in to make
Mm.
sure that both communities have been robust and that children are learning at high levels and that we're feeding and fostering families at a high level, that was extremely important. So when you come to those conversations, I think the first year and that implementation year, I think I counted 60 meetings. And those were
Wow.
within both communities. Those were combined meetings. Those were district meetings. Those were meetings with parents, but a lot with partners, just to make sure everybody knew that we were coming to this work with a collaborative lens of, again, looking at what was working best on both campuses, lifting that up, but then talk about what is going to make us even unique, even the more once we came together.
Right. And watching your story, given my involvement with you and your school, one of the things I was definitely um, proud of with your leadership in this particular process was you were bringing two communities together that I don't think, if you were not in place, right, would have had the kind of conversations that they had with each other as well. And I know with you as a scholar with the role of segregation, desegregation in schools, talk to me a little bit, more about the building of trust, particularly between those two communities, because I think just with the external forces, it was built for them not to necessarily trust each other. So I want you to just tell us a little bit more about how you made that trust happen, because I know you had the meetings, but meetings all the time don't build trust, right? So give us a little more information about the trust piece, how you built that.
Yeah, and I think that is when we look at urban education, we know that trust has to be the foundation of that success, of successful work.
Hmm.
You can show up to meetings, but when you show up, people know when you're genuine and when you're not.
Right.
And
Hmm.
they have to hear your heart for children. So, let me back up to I'm an educator of 20 years, but I'm also a mom of 20 years. I have a
Right.
20-year-old, a 16-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And in that process, my 16-year-old at that point was a student at the school. So every
Hmm.
time I walked into a meeting, I did not just walk in as the principal. I walked in as a parent who
Right.
was going to have our child sitting in the classrooms every day. And my younger child is still there with me. And when you walk into a place, I'm an African American woman. I'm an HBCU
Hmm.
graduate. I,
Right.
live here in Charlotte. I'm very invested in the city. I'm very invested in our community. And I'm very invested in seeing all of our children grow. And I always brought that parent, citizen, and principal lens to any meeting as I was in. So when the conversation would come up about discipline practices, just to be
Right.
fair, the diversity
Yeah.
of the staff, is everyone equipped to handle the merger or change in demographics? I was able to say with confidence that because I know my my core beliefs, and I know the
Right.
foundation that I stand on every day, that I had worked with the staff 6 years prior to this, who, even though the demographic may have not have been as diverse as what it was going to be, we had already laid that foundation. So I do want to shift to professional development.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
had taken a deep dive years prior to into culturally relevant pedagogy. We had looked at what did it look like to serve students from all backgrounds, because as an IB school, you have a very robust, diverse demographic of students. So that's work that we had talked about way before implicit bias
Right.
was a buzzword,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the educational realm. We had already done all that work to make sure that every family and every learner who had come into our classrooms was given that same level of a asset mindset versus a
Right.
deficit mindset. That every family that came through the door, whether, because this is the reality, whether they are struggling with homelessness at the time or they are living in a $1 million home, it doesn't matter, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody who comes through the door, whether it be parent or child, is coming in with an asset that is helping our school community be better. Resilience, persistence, determination, all of those things are very real. And I think once I would sit down with communities and community partners, I was a little bit younger then than I am right now too. But I think initially they're like, oh,
Right.
she's a younger principal, and does she really
Right.
get it? Does she really understand? I don't know. No, I do. I had enough complex layers that I was bringing to the table, and diverse experiences in my life personally and as an educator, that when I walked through the door, I believe in all children, and I'm coming in
Right.
with that principle and that parent lens that everybody's child is going to be treated equally and everybody is going to succeed. And that was the ultimate goal coming in. And you have to just be very honest, from a
Mm-hmm.
partner to a staff member to a parent perspective. If you're not aligning with that vision and you're not aligning with that work, then maybe this isn't the best place, because we're going to do something this world changing here with this move, and you can be a part of it, or
Right.
there you could have another opportunity, because the work and the mission was so great, it took a lot. It was going to
Right.
take a lot to get it done.
And that's why I commend you, because building the trust and what you did with the professional development of the staff. I mean, you were definitely ahead of the curve, in your vision than most principals that I work with around that. And in looking at that, and I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart, because you've had people come and go as part of the process over the years, but you've built a culture of sustainability at your school, and where excellence is the standard, not the exception, right? So, talk to me a little bit about that sustainability piece.
Mhm.
How did you work through making sure excellence is sustainable, in your building, even while you're there, or even your legacy, when you're not there. How have you kind of thought about that as the school leader?
Absolutely. So a strong team is important,
Mm-hmm.
because, as
Right.
you shared, because I am the principal of both campuses, there's always 50% of the day that I'm not in a physical space. And you have to
Right.
make sure that you have a team that's in place that has the same vision, has the same lens to carry on the work. So invest in the time with the leadership team. There's a assistant principal on both campuses, as well as two deans of students, as well as a facilitator team for literacy and math, and a robust support staff team. So again, it's spending the time that you need with the people who are on the team to truly understand the vision and buy into that. I am
Right.
a I would not consider myself a my I'm not a type A person. I'll just say it that way. I
Right.
don't consider
Yeah.
myself a
Yeah.
type A person. But at the end of the day, everybody knows I have very high
Sure.
expectations of how things should look. Again, going back to, because it's about children, because we know that the level of education they receive in our classrooms every day has the possibility to break generational curses of poverty, We know it has the
Sure.
possibility to set children and families on a trajectory they have not seen before. So we know that the work they do every day truly matters. So having a strong team is the core of making sure that this work is continuing when I'm in the building and years down the road. After our first 18 months as one campus, or is it two campuses, one school, the pandemic hit.
Right.
So as we were just really gearing up to finish year two, we had a world changing pandemic. And that was just the
Right.
reality of how you then again shift from, okay, we just became two schools, we just onboarded staff. Now we are, dealing with virtual learning and all the things that came with that, and how some families were just able to hire tutors and have children, and with the teachers sitting
Right.
beside them every single day, they were able to
Day.
do that.
Right.
And you could tell that behind them, it was just these robust learning environments where we had some children who did not have that support at all. So, again, working with partners, digging deep, making sure, we had a equity lens for any work that we were doing throughout the pandemic.
Right.
But again, just
Mm-hmm.
holding those expectations that this is
Yeah.
what it's all about for kids, and that really matters. And I don't want to try to simplify it, but you
Right.
have to, as a leader, when you are interviewing staff, when you are building a team, you have to make sure you are bringing on people who are in alignment with the vision, who have the true heart that you do. And that makes the world a difference. It truly does.
Right. Right. And, given those world changing events, that's not something you prepare for. You can't really prepare for that. And I do remember kind of thinking back on that time, when you had some kids with no computers, no internet at home, and having that requirement, for virtual learning. And you had both sides of the socioeconomic status, of
Mhm.
families at your school. So, how you managed that was really well, and I commend you for that as well. So I want to tap into something that I know you share sometimes, but I'm gonna just kind of press you on it, right? Because I know you don't like to talk about you a lot, but as many people are going to watch the podcast, across education and aspiring school leaders as well, and I want to tap into your wisdom for school leaders that are out there that may be leading new into the school turnaround process or in the school turnaround process, currently. Let's talk about some lessons learned and recommendations
Mhm.
that you would give a school leader as they venture, into this space that they really need to keep in mind if they're going to have not only kind of year over year change, but sustainable change over time, which you have done an excellent job in. So let's talk through that a little bit before we wrap up about some recommendations that you think are important for school leaders to consider, especially given environments that are in place, in school turnaround schools.
Absolutely. So the first thing is, as all of us started out as teachers, what we heard was the most important word was building relationships with your students. I will
Right.
share with anyone going into the principalship, you have got to build a relationship, have to build relationships with your staff. When we
Mm-hmm.
talked about trust, same thing for staff. Bringing in new initiatives, same thing for staff. People will not respond to initiatives that are sustainable. Let me say that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Buy in to change if you don't have the trust there. And in order to have the trust there, you had to spend time building those relationships. So new into the principalship, please make sure you would take the time to meet with every staff member, get to
Mm-hmm.
know them beyond what you see every day in their classrooms, get to know them as a person, and get to know their strengths and what their goals are as well. Because once you have the backstory to the people who you are spending the majority of your day with and this important work with, you truly understand what they need to build their capacity and what they need to feed them as a human being, because we are people. And all of
Right.
us need support. And that looks
Mm-hmm.
different in every way. So take the time to invest in your people that are in the building. I know sometimes, especially in the turnaround situation, you're thinking, I got to come in and just get it done. But if you spend
Right.
the time, like they say, go slow to go fast, to invest in people, get to know them and know their areas of strength, that is going to go a very long way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, beyond that, making sure you're spending time again with the families and the community that you're serving, and making sure they understand that this work is a partnership, that we are here for the success of your child and what is it that your family needs to be successful. For some families, it looks very different because it may be basic needs that they need for their child to come in every day and be successful. Another family, it may need that they need the supports to matriculate their child through curriculums or enrichment experiences and beyond, that their child needs to be feel like they're growing as a learner, or same for the families. But building relationships with your staff, building relationships with
Mm-hmm.
families. But you, as the principal, you have got to have an instructional lens. You have to
Right.
know when you go into classrooms what good teaching looks like. Are the students engaged? Is what the teacher's teaching is aligned to the standards that they should be focused on? What is the level of rigor and what strategies are you using? So, you can have strong relationship skills and building a team where everybody's happy to come to work every day, and that's going to be important. But you have to make sure to study, to show that
Right.
self-approved study yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that
That's right.
when you walk into those classrooms that what's happening is going to actually move the dial for every student. Then after you're in those classrooms, then you have to have a data analysis lens to make sure that what I saw with my eyes and what I see on paper is helping to move the dial for every student. So relationships,
Right.
making sure you have that instructional lens, and making sure you and your team have a level of data analysis capacity, so
Right.
you can really
Yeah.
make individual learning plans for every child in the building. I cannot stress that enough, how important that is. It's not one overall score, it's how every individual child is doing in the building.
Great. Great. And so I want to close out on something that I knew you had to deal with, but you did it so well and made it look easy, but it's not necessarily easy, and it's the change of what I call external forces on the outside of the school. I know you sat under a number of superintendents during your tenure there, and but you kept the school consistent when everything external was changing quite a bit. So, for a school leader or educator that is watching the podcast and sometimes get overwhelmed by the external things, how did you keep a focus at your campus um, and let that be lessons learned for
Mhm.
them as they think about their strategies?
Yeah, so I'm a North Carolinian. So I grew up in one of the smaller counties in the state, Stokes
Yeah.
County, and I've been an educator in CMS, one of the largest counties, in the state,
Right.
for the past 20 years. And one thing I can tell you, regardless of the county you're in, the organizational structure of the county, superintendents, whatever that may be, at the end of the day, if you keep your eye on the children in the building, and you keep your focus on teaching and learning, that's what it's all about. All the other things is going to shift, it's going to change. People will come, people will go. There will be new initiatives, there will be old ones, there'll be new ones again, and then the old ones will come back. So just
Right.
know, but if you keep your eye focused on children first, and teaching and learning, and making sure
Mhm.
you're doing the best that you can do for the people who you've been put in front of to serve and to lead, you will never go wrong. I can assure you of that. Stay focused on what's happening in the building that you're in, and then the works will speak for themselves. And you just have to have that lens. You have to have that resilience. You have to have that
Right.
tenacity. You're going to have deadlines, expectations, all
Right.
those other things from external factors. But when you do your work well, all of those other things will fall into place.
Great, great. And that's excellent wisdom. And I wanted to just bring that out because a lot of times, in education, we underestimate all of that that's going on the outside and your ability to maintain the focus in your building. That's why I want to, at least let you share around that as well. So I know your time is valuable, and I really appreciate your time for just hanging out with me, just to have this conversation on the School Turnaround Podcast. So just know I'm indebted to you for your time and joining us today. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for joining us as well. Okay.
Thank you. And Dr. Lewis, can I say one more thing? Because I do
Sure,
for
sure
a
you
new
can.
principal.
Yes, yes.
Surround yourself with strong mentors and coaches.
Hmm.
I will
Yeah,
tell
I do know you had that. I know you had that
Yes,
as
I
well.
will tell anyone that my hiring principal here in CMS and the principal I worked under, so worked under two principals, they are my mentors and coaches to this day. And I'm 20 years in. They're retired. They're now on the school
Hmm.
board and they're doing amazing things even beyond their principalship. But having strong mentors and leaders who've done the work to pour into you means everything. So make sure that you are building a village of support to help you sustain in this work.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So we'll close out on that note. We appreciate you for joining us today. We really appreciate it as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much as well.
Thank you.